Hi, everybody. So today I thought we would just quickly end out the war itself, and I'm going to give you another video to watch with this today. Um, let's just look at how the war ends, because after Gettysburg, the war quickly falls apart for the Confederacy. And although they last for another almost 2 full years, it is really this guy, where is he? Right there, you can see him right above my head, Ulysses S. Grant, who ends really the South's ability to fight. So Grant changes the way the war was fought. He goes from as Lee called it, a gentlemanly war, where you didn't attack towns and houses. Grant throws that out the window. He's going to engage in total war. He says, I am going to destroy the entire South, because that's the only way to get them to stop fighting on the battlefield. He appoints his second in command, William Tecumseh Sherman, named after the Indian chief, to lead a southern campaign, meaning he's going to basically march across the South wreaking havoc. He makes the famous statement, I'm going to make Georgia howl like the dog that she is. Sherman destroys everything of value in the South. So much so that the South doesn't recover for a very long time. So it actually there were nicknames. He would heat up railroad ties and twist them up, have a horse pull them backwards and twist them up so they were unusable. And they started to call them Sherman bow ties or Sherman neckties because it looked like they were tied up. When they came to a house that had been burned down and there was just the chimney standing, they would call it a Sherman toothpick. So his march to the sea, which I'll show you in a minute, was really destructive of Southern property. And it did also emancipate slaves. There's some controversy about it because he didn't help free Union prisoners of war who were being starved to death at Anderson Prison. There's a lot to go into there. I think that's in your book. There's a section on Anderson Prison. Alright, so his march to the sea really goes until the middle of 1864. He thought that total war was necessary to defeat the South. So he starts out in Chattanooga, Tennessee, marches to Savannah, Georgia, literally burning a path. Then he marches up through South Carolina and into North Carolina at Fayetteville. This right here, Bentonville, was one of the last major battles of the war, actually. And when I lived in North Carolina, I lived about 5 miles from Bentonville battlefield, and they used to do reenactments. It was pretty cool. So he thought this total war, meaning you don't just fight on the battlefield, you fight everywhere. And the Battle of Atlanta was really the last straw. Atlanta got burned to the ground, and it was a huge Union victory because it took out the South's remaining railroad ability to move things on a railroad, so they could no longer move goods or troops. There they are tearing up the tracks right here. You can actually see it, creating a Sherman necktie. The problem was, though, for the South, was that Robert E. Lee had never fought like this. Robert E. Lee easily could have, when he was in Gettysburg, burned Gettysburg to the ground. He could have marched to Philadelphia and burned Philadelphia to the ground. He never did it. And in some ways, Robert E. Lee's view of what war should be like, that it was on a battlefield, you didn't destroy the homes of women and children, really in the end hurt him because he could have really wreaked some real havoc on the North. So in the middle of all this, Lincoln is running for re-election, and his opponent is none other than George B. McClellan, the failed general that Lincoln fired after the Battle of Antietam. And he had a tough re-election against McClellan because McClellan really went after him and said, well, the reason the war has gone on so long is because of Lincoln's leadership. I never got the troops I needed. I never got this. I never got that. It's not my fault. It's Lincoln's fault. And really, what got Lincoln reelected was the Battle of Atlanta. And if you look here, he won 55% of the popular vote, but he wins an overwhelming percentage of the electoral vote. I just want to draw your attention here. Congratulations, New Jersey. You voted against Abraham Lincoln. Way to go. New Jersey was one of the last Democratic strongholds in the North. during this time period. Let's go to the next slide. I don't know if you guys can see this. Lincoln's second inaugural address, he promises that the South will be brought back into the Union with what he calls malice toward none and charity for all. You're going to be looking at Lincoln's second inaugural address when we, on Monday or Tuesday, depending on which period you're in. Lee determines that he can no longer fight the war after the Battle of Appomattox. Appomattox was a small town outside of Richmond. Appomattox Courthouse, it was actually called. It's really just a little tiny town. And when he decides he can no longer fight the war, he goes and meets in Wilbur McLean's living room. He meets with Grant and signs his surrender. Grant gave Lee very lenient surrender terms. He was allowed to return on his horse. It was not as humiliating as it could have been. Grant really respected Lee, and it was because they had both fought together in the Mexican-American War. Actually, in this living room, Grant says, General Lee, this is the second time we have met. I met you during the Mexican-American War, and Lee said, I don't really recall. Lee was the big name here, not Grant, but Grant really made a name for himself in this war. The war ends with a handshake between the two men. The funny thing is there were still Confederates who wanted to keep fighting, but Lee encouraged them all to go home and to be good citizens of the United States. So at the end of the war, you can see how much land the Union had taken from the South. Huge amounts on the coast, Savannah, Georgia, parts of Florida, all the way up Wilmington, North Carolina, which was a major port, also all the way down through here. So the South was really losing, and you can see that there was the blockade still going on. So the South was really at a huge disadvantage, and they were never able to overcome it. And really, here it is. This is what I said at the very beginning. The lack of resources and the inability to unify the Confederate States really ended the Civil War. When the North advanced into the South, they were not able to overcome that massive disadvantage. And we will look at Lincoln's assassination later, but I would like you to watch the video I post with this. It's America, the Story of Us, the Civil War episode. So I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.